What's going on, everybody? Louie T here for Because Bitcoin. You know what that means. We are back with another crypto market update. Today, we're going to be talking about the most important chart in crypto right now and why watching this chart will let you know if Bitcoin and crypto are about to enter a bull run or not. Though, I need you to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications, and check out the links down below. BB Discord, join us. Brand new price. We literally cut the price by more than 60% per month. On top of that, use promo code TRADERX50. That's going to give you another 50% off our brand new price. And BB Trader X, automated trading at your fingertips, completely free, guys. All you need is a Hyperliquid account. Go check that down below as well. So let's dive into it. The most important chart right now in crypto for me is Tether dominance, right? Or USDTD, USTDD.D. That's going to be the percentage that the larger stable coin in the market, which is Tether, has compared to the rest of the market, right? So in a simplest way to describe this is when US Tether dominance is going up, large players or large institutions and investors are selling, right? And going into stable coins. That's why the percent dominance goes up, because as people sell into their stable coins, those stable coins represent more of the pie of the entire crypto market. When it falls, that is a great visualization of people coming out of their Tether and deploying that into the market, whether that's to buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, anything, right? So when you follow this chart, you're pretty much following the inverse of Bitcoin in a way, right? In a way. But ultimately, the gist of it, very simple, very easy. USDT.D goes up, Bitcoin and crypto go down. USDT.D goes down, Bitcoin and crypto go up. So that is why we're watching this chart, because I think we're at a key inflection point here. And I think it's something worth noting and watching. So up top is that chart, right? That's the US Tether dominance chart. And below, we have Bitcoin. If you've been following along the last month or two, I've been pretty much comparing a lot of the price action we've been seeing here locally over the last few months to back here when we bottomed in mid to late 2024 here. You know, and there's a lot of similarities, right? We can point to. The price action is very similar, right? So we made a capitulation low here. This was a 30% cascading sell-off, right? In just a short period of time. Price never returned to that low, and price began to slow grind, leaving a ton of stacked liquidity below. And it was a slow grind for multiple months, right? Before eventually breaking higher and bringing Bitcoin to that 100K price area that everyone was waiting for, right? So this is a great example of how price can make a capitulation low and leave stacked lows behind and look ugly and look wonky and awkward and continue just to make higher lows, right, before breaking higher, right? And this is kind of the reason why I've been pointing to this time period as to what we're seeing now, because it's the closest thing I could find that you know that's relevant to the price action we're seeing now. The only key difference here, which is something I've also acknowledged in other videos, but people don't watch the full video, is that this was more so coming out of an 8-month consolidation, right? This was more so a consolidation, just ranging chop price action in an uptrend before breaking higher, whereas this bottoming structure is coming out of more or less a multi-month downtrend, right? This is very different. This price action here is very different from what we saw here, right? In the months preceding it. But what is the same? What is the same, which many people aren't realizing, is this 30% capitulation, right? So although this was a major consolidation structure, the capitulation, the speed, and the percentage drop was almost identical to the one we saw here, right? Where 30% to the downside in just a week or two. This about 33, 34% to the downside in just a few weeks or two. Creates that pivot point low, and price never returns back for this low, which everyone is still waiting for. And can it come? Absolutely, right? I'm well aware that the odds of Bitcoin leaving stacked lows below in a structure like this is rare, right? But at the end of the day, trading is probabilities. It is not absolutes, corrects or incorrect. That is not trading. It's a higher probability, but the chances are still not zero. And this is a great example of it, right? So not only, right, is the price action of Bitcoin following very similarly to this time period that we saw back in, mid to late 2024, but also the USDT dominance chart is also looking almost identical, right? And I think this is something that I'm finding very interesting, where the last kind of pullback that Bitcoin had here before breaking away for like a 62% bullish time period, right? USDT dominance also had one last push up and sweep of the highs before finally capitulating, right? So I'm seeing a lot of similarities, not only in the price, but also the Tether dominance chart, right? And the timing is the same. Whereas if you look at this structure, blow off top, big wick, kind of a slow, droopy, lethargic sell-off that could be mistaken for a potential like bull flag or something before continuation, ultimately ended up capitulating to the downside. And if you look at this structure and look at this structure where we're at now, I'm hoping you can see the similarities here. All right. I'm hoping you can see the similarities here where you have a significant blow off top, a long, drawn out, droopy kind of consolidation structure begins to form. And over the weekend, we just got like a local sweep of these highs and an attempted breakout of this structure. So if I had to, point a picture as to where I think we're at, and again, these are always going to look different. I'm not a big fractal guy. I'm really not. But when I'm seeing this many similarities, there's no such thing as coincidences. It feels like we're right here, right? It feels like we're right here where Bitcoin was putting in its last little bit of pullback. This was 6 or 7 days of pullback, about a 10% pullback. We're in about that same time period as well, about 6, 7, 8 days of pullback, and about a 10% pullback to the downside, just as kind of we saw here, right? Before blasting higher, right? Before blasting higher. So that is, I just wanted to show that for context as far as, I've been comparing Bitcoin price action to this time period and why I'm now also comparing US Tether dominance to this time period as well. So now let's just go to a full screen for Tether dominance and take a closer look at the data here, because it is more just than price action that I'm looking at here. Another thing, right, that I'm looking at here, get rid of some of these old drawings, is the fact that the daily RSI for Tether dominance over the last several months has never really fully reset, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, here's a clear example, right? We're talking about this example. Let's look closer at the RSI for this example. US Tether dominance makes a blow off high, right? RSI pushes well above the overbought level and begins to bleed, right? What the RSI did here as well is the RSI on the daily stalled out, right? And it formed a little mini base here where it never fully reset until it had one more big push up. Price did that one last big push up, running the local highs, attempting to break out of this kind of descending channel. And then on this last push up, right? On Bitcoin's last pullback, bang, you finally got that true RSI reset, going a cyclical reset from overbought to oversold. The capitulation ensues, and USDTD begins to range and form a new bottom, right? The RSI right now, along with price, also looking very, very similar, right, to what we saw back here, right, where we went from overbought territory on the blow off top. We have began our cyclical reset. You know, the RSI is a cyclical indicator. Overbought, slow bleed ensues, and we stalled out and formed what I like to call a false bottom or a trapdoor, where you front run the lows, you trap the last bit of whatever you want to call it. In this case, it would be bears, right? Because this going up would be bearish for Bitcoin. You run or you push into your local structure highs. You attempt to break out of this descending channel. Ultimately, what we're looking for now is, does this stall out before fully resetting down here, right? And completing the full cyclical rotation from overbought to oversold that we see almost every time, right? When you see the daily RSI looking like this. So this is kind of what I'm tracking, right? So if you're, looking for a bullish scenario, you want to see, and we can zoom in a little further here now, what you want to see, and we can drop to maybe the 9 hour and get rid of the RSI. You want to see that this move over the weekend on US Tether dominance, you want this to be a failed rally or a failed breakout, right? Because we got a little sell-off over this weekend, right? Price attempted to push these local highs to break this ascending channel and immediately got rejected, right? And immediately got rejected. I would call this a pretty significant rejection here. And now we're kind of drifting higher, what I think could be a bearish retest, right? So if you're bullish, right? If you're bullish or you don't know, right, if whether you should be bullish or not, you should be watching this chart. And if this fails and continues lower here, right, and we start breaking these local lows, we start trading lower, that should be bullish confirmation for you that a rally bigger than what we've seen has already ensued, right? Or is likely occurring as you're watching it. If you're bearish, right, and you think we're going to make new lows or we're going to return to the lows for Bitcoin, and all coins would obviously make, probably fresh lows or return to their lows. You want to see this chart do this, right? Get back above these highs after rejecting, successfully break this, descending channel and start to break out, right? Because I have to be honest, like on the higher time frame, this is a continuation pattern, right? It's called a bull flag, where you're in an uptrend on Tether dominance, right? Just like it, here, right? This is a perfect example of a bull flag. Uptrend, sideways chop, bull flag, consolidation, bang, continuation, right? This is a way better example, clean. I would consider this not the best bull flag. A little too slanty for my liking. It's a little droopy. You also had a blow off top here, a significant one. So, we'll see. I'm open for either, right? We've made a ton of money in the Discord longing altcoins during this process, right? So longs have been the play regardless. But the question is, do we continue, or does US Tether dominance go for a bigger move, right? Which would be, right, if Tether dominance doesn't top here, it's likely coming for these highs, right? So if this actually is a bull flag and it breaks out, you're likely coming for your all-time highs for Tether dominance. This would lead to minimum, probably return back to the lows for Bitcoin, probably a massacre in ETH and altcoins. And then you kind of would have to look for a top up here. The problem with that is I don't think there's going to be a market to come back to if that occurs here, just with the sentiment and everything else out there in this market is really like the worst I've ever seen it. Right. So we'll see. Right. If we start seeing this break out, whatever I have left open on the table, probably close it out, wait for, a return at least to the blow off top high or these highs, and then look to reposition up here again. But I am prepared for a rejection and that final capitulation on Tether dominance that, similar to what we saw in mid to late 2024. So I think we're getting real close to finding out, guys. I think we're getting really close to finding out. And, if I had to compare this chart to something else, if I were to just remove all these drawings real quick. I'm also going to put the DXY down below as well, because, the DXY I think is a perfect, this one or this one is a perfect example to compare Tether to, right? Because Tether's the dollar of crypto and DXY is the dollar of the world, essentially. And I think that Tether dominance can be putting in a similar move to what we saw the DXY do in 2025, right? Where I'm not going to make this perfect, but it's going to be as close as we can get. Because I know there's a lot of people out there saying that the Tether dominance chart must sweep its all-time highs first. And my argument would be, again, there's no such thing as a must or a guarantee. There's just probabilities, right? And my argument would be, well, why didn't the DXY, and we're going to get there in a second once I finish this drawing. This is about as close as we're going to get it without me wasting too much time. Why wouldn't the DXY, after breaking its multi-month range, why wouldn't have it came for this high after breaking the range, right? Why wouldn't it do that, right? It's because, again, there's no such thing as guarantees. So, another comparison would be Tether dominance to the DXY back in 2025, where the DXY went on a monster bullish tear here. And I remember everyone and their mothers was super bullish on the DXY, calling for all-time highs and even price discovery, fresh all-time highs, because we broke out of this multi-month range, or multi-year range. Very similar to what we're doing here, right? Multi-month range, multi-year range, breakout. And now we're stalling, right? Just like the DXY did here before eventually collapsing. Again, similar. This is actually the daily, so I could probably put this on the daily as well. Very similar looking charts. Again, I'm not a big fractal guy, but I'm just showing you an example of where you don't need to come sweep the high as far as like Tether and USDT is concerned. You don't need to come sweep the lows as far as Bitcoin's concerned. And you could still be macro topped. And this is just one major range deviation where you broke out of the range. You could not continue. You break back inside the range. This type of move, a breakdown back inside the range and back to range lows, would be an absolute face-ripping bull market for crypto that no one is really positioned for. Everyone's been stopped out. Everyone's been deterred. Everyone's out of this market, right? And that's exactly when these things occur, right? That's exactly when these things occur. So I'm seeing both sides of the equations. I acknowledge both sides of the equation, but at the end of the day, I've been positioning bullishly for a while now, multiple months. We've hit multiple trades. I bought Bitcoin low 60s. So if Bitcoin returns to the lows, my buys go back to break even. Oh, well, right? But ultimately, just too many coincidences with the Tether dominance chart to what we saw back in mid to late 2024, right? And I always say there's no such thing as coincidences in these markets. So that's all I got, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Keep an eye on the Tether dominance chart. It's going to tell you everything you need to know. And we'll come back next week and check it out. Until then, I'll see you later. Peace.